Welcome to Wise Up on Air. Hey, I hope everyone is settled in for a special edition of Wise Up Hands On today. We've got a special guest in the back here, and I'm joined by Benoit, who will hear all about this exciting feature that we're rolling out at the end of March called event-based packaging as part of the Wise Unreal integration.
Mm-hmm.
Looking forward to talking more about that during today's segment. So get settled in, get comfy. We've got the chat there. Drop any questions, please. We're going to throw around some terminology. We're going to assume a little bit of understanding of Wise and Unreal. So if anything goes over your head, let's drop it in the chat. We've got our special guest back here helping out with the chat moderation. This is Bernard, and let's start.
Let's start.
Great. So first of all, I just wanted to take a step back. Again, part of this Wise Up on Air is a chance to take a peek behind the curtain here at the development at Audiokinetic, and I wanted to introduce Benoit Santerre. And why don't you tell us a little bit about what your role is here at Audiokinetic, what you've been doing, maybe even a little of how you got here.
Yep. So I've started working at AK 6.5 years ago now, back when Unreal was still behind closed doors and Unity had plugins only for pro subscribers. So it's been quite a while. I was hired actually to take care of integrations. So it was starting to pick up back in 2013. People were using more and more Unity, more and more Unreal, and the developers that maintained these integrations part-time realized quickly that we needed someone full-time.
Yeah, and I think of integrations as that connective tissue between Wise and a game engine like Unity or Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
It really just kind of ties the two together in a way that brings the features back and forth.
Yep, exactly. So the first integrations we had were actually just, porting our C++ API to the engine, which wasn't very designer friendly. So one of the tasks I had was to actually develop workflows within those engines and make sound designers' lives easier so that they don't depend that much on programmers. I think I can say 6 years later, we've made huge progress in that area. I'm excited to show you, I think, what is one of the most integrated features we've had so far with an engine.
Super cool evolutionary leap in the way that we manage assets between Wise and Unreal. I'm super excited to have you on the stream today, and I can't wait to dig in deeper on it. Before we dig in, I just wanted to say that this event-based packaging coming out later in March, part of a big push this year in our 2019.2 release that came out earlier in March. And one of the big features as part of it, we'll be covering some more of those features in upcoming live streams. So keep it peeled, hit that subscription, and we'll keep you posted on the fun stuff that we're talking about and cool overviews that we'll be doing in the future.
Yep.
So with that, let's get hands-on with this Wise Unreal event-based packaging.
All right.
So let's...
Yep. Switching to showing our desktop. So you all know the Wise Launcher. So we'll start from the beginning just to show people how to start from scratch with a Wise and Unreal project. So go to the Unreal tab. It conveniently finds your recent Unreal projects. I have created an empty Unreal project that I will integrate Wise into.
Yeah, and there's also the Unreal Audio Lab, the Wise Audio Lab that you can download and mess around with. But for our purposes, we got a new and empty project.
Yep. So choosing the correct version that contains event-based packaging, it's as easy as clicking integrate here, and then we wait.
I mean, this is the internet, right? Things are fast, but not always so fast, and you can expect a little bit of time there. But hey, that progress bar seems pretty real. I've had some progress bars that are I don't know if they're exactly telling me the truth.
Yeah, well, this one kind of got stuck right there, though. But
Yeah, it's working really hard. This is a really hard part,
Yeah.
you know.
so, once this is done, which should be any minute now, any
Yeah.
second now,
Yeah.
we'll be able to we'll show you basically how to get a sound playing within Unreal while showing these new event-based features.
Yep.
So we are done. Let's see how it looks like in Unreal.
Yeah, and again, the Wwise launcher ends up being a great first destination for you to keep track of the projects that you have, keep track of the versions of either Unreal or Wwise that you have integrated, and it's a first-stop shop for just launching those and getting to work.
Yep. And so here we are in Unreal. One of the big features of event-based packaging is actually the interactivity we have between Unreal Editor and Wwise using WAAPI. Thanks to Bernard for WAAPI, by the way.
Yes.
Nice.
So let's open Wwise at the same time so that we can show everything moving at the same time.
Yeah. Sophia says that if you move the cursor, it makes progress bars go faster.
Oh, yeah. And also, if you complain about them, it makes them go faster.
Yeah.
That's personal experience.
I need to do more of that.
Yep. So, you are. Let's just. So you are familiar with Wwise, maybe a bit with Unreal. So we'll just show you a bit what makes that connection work. So
Perfect.
going into the project settings in Unreal, all the way down inside of our own settings, we see a bunch of settings. So
Integration settings. Yeah.
So the main connection is actually here where Unreal needs to know about where the Wwise project is and the all-important connecting to WAAPI checkbox. This will tremendously help your new workflow in Unreal compared to the past integrations.
We're going to show you that.
Yeah.
But it is a key piece that connects Unreal and Wwise.
Yeah. New things we have in event-based packaging can be seen here. So we have basically just use event-based packaging as a whole.
Do it.
Do it,
It's going to be fun.
We now have automatic asset synchronization. So for those of you that are familiar with our existing Unreal integration, you kind of had to manually manage everything, and it could get a bit tiresome after a while.
Yep.
Now we're using, whether you're using WAAPI or not, once again, we recommend using WAAPI. We will automatically create all assets that you create in Wwise automatically in Unreal to remove some of those manual steps.
It's just a smoother workflow, and we're really moving in that direction on all fronts.
Yep. So if you have automatic asset synchronization, assets will be created inside of that SoundData folder automatically for you. And there's a small checkbox here we'll get into more detail later that allows you to optimize your memory if you're using switch containers. We've added localization support in Wwise, so we have a map of culture in Wwise to culture in Unreal so that you can on the fly change your languages, and a few spatial audio settings that I'm sure the R&D team will be glad to showcase.
Absolutely.
Someday.
Keep them tuned. We'll be following up in the future with more on that.
Yeah. So the all-important connection to WAAPI needs to be enabled both in Unreal and inside of Wwise. So now that we're done with our Unreal settings, let's go to Wwise inside of our user preferences. So first, let's distinguish between Wwise and Unreal by switching themes.
That's so cool.
So what you want to have is enable Wwise authoring API, which will be the backbone of that bi-directional integration.
Yep. And that's kind of it. And those things were all defaulted as part of that integration process and kind of tied together for you when you integrated.
Yep.
Bam.
All right. So setup is done.
Great.
You see in Unreal we have a WAAPI Picker window, which is a WAAPI-enabled picker window that replicates the important parts of the Project Explorer in Wwise directly in Unreal. So
perfect.
Without further ado,
wait.
let's have a sound.
Yeah, we better find some WAV files and get those in.
I grabbed a bunch of seagulls from the Wwise Audio Lab project, select them all, and just drop them directly into Wwise.
I love seagulls.
Yep. So now we're done with that. You can see all of our seagulls are there. Going back to Unreal. Oh, connection is there. All my seagulls are here as well.
Bam!
There you go. Of course, these are all variations, so let's grab a few of them and put them inside of a random container.
Sure.
Call it random gull.
I
And
like
there you
it.
go.
And hey, it's over here.
I lost my mouse cursor. Seriously, did you see the mouse cursor?
No.
Oh, there it is.
Ooh.
Sorry about that.
That was so good.
um,
Oh, flock of seagulls. Yeah, I ran.
oh.
Can you want to sing that? Maybe
No.
later. Okay.
You don't want to hear me sing.
Karaoke. We'll do it.
Karaoke will do it. All right. So now, as you might know, the actor-mixer hierarchy really exists for your sound design needs, and it's not really what's used to connect to an actual game engine. What the game engine will post are events, RTPCs, and switches, and all of that.
Yep.
So let's create events from those sources. So
Great.
right-click, new event,
For each object.
play.
Bam.
Now, going to the event hierarchy, we now have
Yes.
all of our events newly
See
created.
those?
Now, going back to Unreal, remember that Wwise audio folder earlier from the project settings?
Totally.
There's now an events folder in there, default work unit, and boom, all of my seagulls are now here.
Yeah. In addition to your play random gull,
Yep.
and those are also represented up in the WAAPI Picker as well.
Exactly. So we're at a good spot. Let's save in Unreal. It's not the same shortcut in Wwise. Save in Wwise.
Mm-hmm.
So we're on a good standing ground.
Awesome.
That reminds me, perhaps we could send a WAAPI command to save the Wwise project when Unreal saves. Mental note.
Ah.
All right. So now just to show you a bit about that WAAPI connection, so which is really the backbone of the integration starting from 2019.2.1.
Yep.
You can, as you saw, we created events in Wwise. They appeared in Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Let's rename an event in Wwise. I don't want to start it with the number, so whatever. Let's add something.
Great.
It's renamed here, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to find it. Man, I created a lot of them.
I know it's in there somewhere.
It's in here. There
Yeah,
you go.
Perfect.
So renaming is supported.
And that's bi-directional. That's not just from Wwise to Unreal. That's from Unreal to Wwise and back again.
So if you want, you can go inside of the Unreal content browser, right-click on an empty area, go to our own menu, and create your own event. So let's hello to everyone. And you saw in Wwise the hello event just appear. So,
And this is just the magic that you should be working with in your Wwise and Unreal integration. When this comes out, we're imagining a really smooth workflow for people to be able to just bounce back and forth between
Yep.
and have what they need without having to take that full circle manual loop.
yeah, so you're working in really your workflow is right now at a place where you're spending a lot of time in Unreal, but you realize you're missing an event.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go back to Wwise and go and create everything and then go back and then hope everything synchronizes. You just do it from Unreal. It'll appear in Wwise. You can implement it later and move on to something else. So it really empowers your workflow.
Awesome.
Yep. And one last thing, because we now showed renaming, creating, you can also reparent everything. So if you move your things around to another work unit, it moves automatically in Unreal.
Yeah.
And then you can also clean up your things. So if you delete an event, now you see in Unreal, we didn't just delete it behind your back and not say anything. We decided to leave the confirm deletion dialog for you because it'll prevent you from deleting something that is referenced in your game by accident. So right now, this hello event wasn't referenced by anything because I just created it. But if you have assets that are referenced somewhere else in your game, those references will show up in that window and it'll tell you, are you sure you want to delete that? You're still using it. So
Yeah.
it's a good reminder to not delete something by mistake. In that case, we want to delete, it's gone.
Beautiful.
Simple as that.
I really like it. I want to dig deeper into what's behind these events and what's behind the WAV files that we brought into the project. I think we need to generate some banks.
Yep. So, if you're familiar with Wwise in general, you know that everything in the game goes through SoundBanks. That new workflow we're showing now is called event-based packaging because essentially we're centering the game around the events now and not necessarily the SoundBanks. So in a way, we're kind of hiding the SoundBanks now from our users.
Yeah, we've actually abstracted it to call it SoundData, I noticed, in the project settings and throughout, because we're not actually creating SoundBanks.
In a way, no, we're not.
Right.
So, as you may know, SoundBanks consist of essentially three things. Most importantly, your media files, then events and structures that Wwise needs to be able to play its controls, knowing what a random container is and whatnot.
Yep.
Right? What we're doing now with event-based packaging is we're cranking the granularity fader to 11. Essentially, we're going to extract the media from the SoundBanks and have them loose in your project. The events and structures Wwise need will still be in a bank, but that bank will be hidden within the event asset itself. So,
right.
Just to summarize, we will generate one SoundBank per event, and that SoundBank won't contain any media files.
Right. And that gets created in a format that Unreal natively manages.
Yes. So everything is represented by Unreal assets, including Wwise Media.
Yep.
So if you're used to our streaming interfaces, our WEM files, which are essentially our Wwise converted files, are wrapped into Unreal assets, and everything is put in memory by Unreal. More on that later.
Yep. Great.
So you saw earlier, I imported waves, created events from them. Now it's time to actually have the game be able to make sounds. So we want to go into the build menu and generate our sound data. So in that window here, you're able to generate what platforms you want to generate for. You can also select languages. If you're not iterating on your dialogue, and we all know dialogue can take a while to generate, you might want to exclude it. There's that option right here. So you're working on a dialogue-heavy game, but you're just iterating on sound effects. Just tick that checkbox. We'll leave dialogue alone and just generate SFX so that you can iterate more quickly.
Exactly.
So for now, we don't have any dialogue. Let's just generate everything. Now, if you were attentive, you saw that in Wwise, the Generate SoundBanks window popped really quickly. Now, banks were easy to generate here, so that's why it was fast.
Yep.
But what happened is we actually used WAAPI to generate those SoundBanks.
Yeah.
So we didn't put anything on disk. We just streamed the SoundBanks through WAAPI and saved them directly within the Unreal asset. So optimizing a workflow, we know hard drives are slow. Hopefully you have an SSD at home, but this removes one less bottleneck from your SoundBank generation workflow.
It's great.
So once this is done, nope, I'm in Wwise. Save everything in Unreal, and now you're ready to have your game make sounds. Just maybe to show you that dependency between loose media files and event.
Yeah.
Now that everything is represented in Unreal assets, we can actually use Unreal tools to see our references. So right-click on an asset, use the reference viewer, and look at that. Remember that random container from earlier? Well, these are all the media files that are referenced by that random container from that event.
Great.
So you can now see that this event has had dependencies set on each variation of the sound that is nested under the random container.
Yep.
Now, you might see that the file names are IDs. This is an optimization in our IO hook to find our files quicker. If you're curious about what actual media file that is, you can edit that asset and we put the media name in a read-only field for you.
Handy.
Yep.
There's a question on the chat.
Yep.
So it's Long Balls Larry. So in this new workflow, the SoundBanks do not have to be loaded correctly. Correct? Is it correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And we no longer have to manage the memory.
Exactly. So right now you're seeing the dependency between event and media, which is all Wwise dependencies, right? The nice thing about that is now that everything is represented by Unreal assets, Unreal takes care of loading your assets for you.
As a dependency of the object that the event is being called on.
So that means that you don't need to think about creating sound banks when you're authoring your sounds, because we're going to create one bank per event and that's out of your head. But your programmer doesn't have to think about loading those sound banks either, because they're wrapped in Unreal assets, and if something in your level references an event, Unreal will just put everything in memory and will send the correct things to Wwise.
So as Unreal is managing the loading and unloading of objects and assets,
yep.
Any audio that is part of that will just come in and out at the level of granularity that your game is managing that natively.
Exactly. So if something is not used in a level right now, it won't be loaded by Unreal.
Yep.
A neat thing that exists, so going back to the project settings, there was one that I skipped over quickly earlier, which is called split switch container media. So I won't create an example of this right now, but essentially the idea is if you have a switch container that has 10 different values. So let's use my favorite example of a switch container being footsteps.
Yeah.
You recorded your Foley for footsteps on sand, on grass, on concrete, on wood, on metal, blah, 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 blah. You have 500 media files all nested under the same container that has one event.
Mm-hmm.
So you can quickly imagine that reference graph here will have 500 lines. You might not want to have all your 500 media files in memory at the same time.
Or all of those materials loaded simultaneously.
So we've added a level of indirection in that reference graph where an event that references switch values will only load the media associated with the switch value that's in use right now in your game.
It just automates that segmentization of switches and the media associated with the switch type.
So say you have a very quick, small interior map that only has concrete floors. Well, you'll only have the concrete footsteps loaded in memory in that map, and you did not even have to think about doing that.
You might have to have the slipper shoe sounds and the sneaker shoe sounds, though.
But if you have sneakers and slippers in memory, they're going to be loaded for you.
You're already covered.
There you go. That's really the paradigm shift. And Long Balls Larry had the good mindset there is you have to shift your way of thinking about media, because you basically don't need to think about it anymore.
Right.
You do your sound design, create your events, we take care of the rest.
Perfect.
Yep.
So let's get some sound in this example map.
Right. So I use an empty Unreal template here. The easiest way to get a sound playing in Unreal is just having a positioned ambience. So let's drag our event and drop it in the map. So you see here that it created an AK ambient sound actor. The one last thing we want to do is ensure that an event is posted on start. So scroll down all the way to the ambient sound options, enable auto post, and let's play. Let's see what happens. Here you go.
Awesome.
That's it.
Yeah.
So you have your sound. You have a sound in your game. An interesting thing is then to go back to the reference viewer for that event, because now we can see that our map is now referencing our event.
Yeah.
Meaning that when that map gets loaded, Unreal will put our event in memory and then will ensure to load the appropriate medias and whatnot.
That's right. And I saw that quick save that you did in between. That updates the reference viewer,
yes,
right?
So that's a limitation of the Unreal reference viewer. You need to save your assets before you actually use it. I've been burned by this a few times.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's essentially it.
We're getting a note from the stream chat about it being familiar. If you're thinking this looks familiar, you might be thinking about prepared events, which is a similar type function that it's existed as part of the Wwise SDK for a long time.
But it's been very programmer heavy to support.
Exactly. And so this iteration really brings it into a kind of transparency where, again, it's existed to a certain degree, like you said, under the hood, but it really makes that process transparent for a user, for a sound designer, composer working between Unreal and Wwise, and no longer requires a programmer to do the under the hood wiring.
Exactly. And just to reassure you, streaming still works even though we're wrapping our events inside of our assets inside of Unreal assets. So we're able to access the streaming media correctly in our IO code, even though it's a format we're not necessarily familiar with. We took care of that for you. And yeah.
Okay, so what if I need to do a level of optimization? Like I've got a level, I know I want to load a bunch of different events up front to get them cached or ready to play. What do I do?
Yeah, so we still kept SoundBanks.
Okay, great.
So as a way to organize your events, or let's say you have one event per line of dialogue and you only want to have one dialogue SoundBank. If you want to retain a bit of control on your media organization, you can still grab a bunch of events and group them into a SoundBank. So we kept the SoundBank concept.
Yeah.
Now, those SoundBanks are essentially Unreal assets that group events together, and that's essentially it.
Great. So we're creating one here.
So we're creating an event, call it, we're creating a bank.
Yep. Sorry, bank.
My bank. And then we group those events in there.
Great.
Save. And now we see a reference to that.
Great.
Now, that SoundBank asset will, just like an event asset, contain only events and structures. The media will still be loose, as you can see here. And the event is still the brain behind those references.
Got it. And just to confirm, show me the SoundBanks over in Wwise. Like, it didn't create a SoundBank in Wwise.
Nope. So that's the thing with the Unreal way of that workflow is you do not think about SoundBanks when you're in Wwise.
Bingo pajamas.
Exactly. So your SoundBank hierarchy will always be empty and shouldn't have anything in it ever.
Dig.
Yep.
So that's a evolution in the automation of media management, really.
Yeah.
It removes the need to manually manage SoundBanks in Wwise. For games that don't have any large scale optimization needs, they don't need to do any SoundBank grouping. They can leave things to Unreal's asset management.
Yep.
It really brings a transparent workflow for events bi-directionally between Wwise and Unreal.
Exactly. And the burden of optimizing memory doesn't rest on the sound designer anymore. It rests basically on no one because it's all automated for you.
Yeah.
That's really the big takeaway from there is those references are essentially managing your memory for you. If you're using something, it's going to be available. If you're not, it's not going to be there. So a key advantage in that is you could easily, within the Unreal ecosystem, write a quick script that finds any event that doesn't have any references. When you're done optimizing your project, when you're in the process of optimizing your project in the final miles before shipping, you might want to prune your assets to make your project leaner and whatnot. And we all know that a project evolves very quickly and things change all the time. So, of course, there will be orphaned assets.
Yeah.
You're able to quickly find them and remove them without any repercussions.
And this idea of trying to keep in parity what exists in the game, what's shipping, with what's necessary within Wwise to play the sound. That parity, I think, is really something that not a lot of games achieve because it's not always easy to draw those direct references between game side assets and Wwise events and assets. So it really allows for a level of optimization there that brings these things into parity or has the opportunity to.
And another disadvantage of the old SoundBank workflow was you could have a big SoundBank containing many events, but if any one of those events are unused, they're still going to be part of that SoundBank and put in memory, wasting memory for everyone.
Right.
So by having those granular assets and SoundBanks, that removes that risk altogether.
Great. Looks like Larry's got another question. Bernard, what's what do we got chiming in from the chat room?
Well, it says so much better. Nice job on this. What are the drawbacks to this approach, and any latency when playing the sound? Just wondering why you would want to create the sound banks. Is it to generate fewer events to increase performance, generation time?
Okay, so a couple of questions there. First on latency. What's been your experience so far?
Nothing particular. I mean, basically Unreal takes care of loading everything, putting everything in memory, and the only thing our integration does is actually point our Wwise sound engine to the memory blocks that Unreal allocated for us.
Yep.
So there's, of course, if you dynamically load something in memory, there will be a small delay before everything is available. So you have to think ahead of that.
And in the case of streaming, we do have properties and tools to allow for zero latency streaming,
exactly,
pre-caching.
Yep.
And so there's some solutions there if you do find you're in a situation where the latency is unacceptable. However, it's been my experience that for most things, this is just smooth.
Yep. And one last question in there was, why would you want to create sound banks? Simply from an organization perspective, there's no runtime advantage to grouping things into sound banks. Everything remains super granular. It's just a way of perhaps seeing relations between your events, but then again, you can also use work units for that. So it's a preference that we wanted. We know some people will want to keep organizing their things like that, so we wanted to keep that option, but it's really an optional thing.
Yeah, and I mean, ultimately, game development is such a multifaceted thing. Everyone is going to choose how they do it, and it's really our goal to support all of the different ways that people choose to manage their media in this way. And so like you said, carrying that forward for people who are comfortable in that is a concern, and one of the reasons why we carried that concept forward.
Yep.
A question from Sean. How do you manage memory when everything is dynamically loaded with a level of or objects?
So that's the big takeaway from that is you can now think of your Wwise assets in the same way you think about your Unreal assets, because that's essentially what they are. As I said just a few minutes ago, we're just pointing the sound engine to the memory that Unreal allocated for us in its own asset management system. For those familiar with it that want to go deeper, we're using the Set Media API, which essentially tells the Wwise sound engine that media ID you're looking for is at that memory address. So just grab your media from there. So the lifetime of the memory is handled by Unreal. Those being assets, they're essentially U objects. So they're part of the garbage collection scheme that exists within Unreal. So yeah, the big takeaway from that is you can now think of your audio assets just the same way you think about any other asset in your game.
Yeah, this is, this is my tree. It has these sounds associated with it, and I'm going to load the tree in the level. It's going to bring the sounds that it has with it.
Exactly. Perhaps we can show a small example of that. You want to create yourself a blueprint. So let me just create an actor blueprint. Now, for simplicity's sake, let's keep that sphere here. Let's add actually a sphere just so we see it in the game. Now we want that sphere to make sound, so let's add an AK component on that. Now you can see the little icon appeared here.
Cool.
And let me use just any one of my events in there.
Yep.
Save that, close that. Now, going back to the reference viewer, we now see my blueprint referencing that event, recentering the graph. The event references the media file.
Yep.
Now I instantiate that blueprint in my map, and now looking at the reference viewer again. Oh, there you go. I got burned. You need to save. You need to save everything. Sorry, that's not what I wanted to pop. So going back to my reference viewer, now see my map, references my blueprint, references my event, references my media.
Yeah, so the memory management is really a cascading piece of your game and what it loads and unloads.
Exactly.
So it becomes a dependency on how your game is managing just the parent objects for a scene or otherwise.
Exactly.
Thanks for the questions, Sean. Following up on that.
Well, yeah, Senator Monkey, any mention on the new memory manager in 19.2?
Yeah, well, that's one of the new features that Damian will maybe want to talk about in a subsequent Twitch.
So yeah, keep it peeled. Click the subscribe. Keep your eyes on the future. We will be having a Wwise 2019.2 features overview where we'll dig deeper into this. And I think you're going to want to tune in for that. If you haven't had a chance to already download 2019.2 and explore some of the cool new stuff, we'll walk you through that in the future and dig deeper onto the new changes to the memory manager.
Yep. And for those curious, so yes, Senator Monkey is right because it's actually Mike from our sales department. So yes, we rewrote the entire memory manager to be essentially more multi-threading friendly because multi-threads is all the craze right now. And at the same time, we took the opportunity to just get rid of memory pools whatsoever. So it makes memory management easier. That being said, there's less of an influence in Unreal because, as I said earlier, Unreal takes care of putting our things in memory.
Yeah.
And we just point to that memory. Another comment from Mike. So we can avoid loading a sound or event in code by just actually... Can you avoid loading an event in code by not loading the event U asset rather than using the Wwise system to call sounds? So that's the beauty of it. It's all managed by the Unreal system. So if you have an LOD system that omits loading certain things that have dependencies on audio data, it just won't be in memory because of that LOD system.
Yeah.
So
I think the important piece there is that it all kind of cascades from Unreal's management of actors and objects in the game.
Exactly.
And we're falling right in line with the way that they manage those assets in a highly granular way that keeps things clean. And we'll be really looking forward to hearing more from you once this makes it into the wild at the end of March here. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback of how you're using it, how it's working well, and even if it has some problems in your particular workflow. Because as we mentioned before, it is a multifaceted game development environment out there in the world, and we want to hear from you. So please let us know once you get your hands on this, how's it working for you in your pipeline? Yep.
So another comment from Carlos. I know this is Carlos from Twitter. I recognize the name.
Good to see you.
Yep. Yes, it is exciting, and you're saying my team and I have been using this method of the SoundBank in UE4 for the past 3 years. So that was one motivation behind it. So a lot of feedback we got from customers using Unreal was that SoundBank management was tedious. And we did know that a lot of customers had implemented a similar kind of system with maybe prepare events, maybe set media.
Yeah.
The way we envisioned it to empower really all possible workflows and alternatives, because that's really our mantra here, is we get a lot of feedback from customers that do something specific for their game that works well, and what we want to try to do is grab that feature that worked well for one use case and then generalize it to the entire user base. We had to modify the Wwise authoring tool to be able to achieve that. So we were able to go like splitting the switch containers by switch value in memory. We did have to modify the way Wwise reports bank metadata at bank generation so that we could recreate that dependency tree in Unreal.
And like you said, it's all towards this idea of empowering folks who are using Wwise in their workflows, bringing these use cases that that are brought to us, and trying to bring them to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It's really trying to create an ecosystem where we all have the same tools and the same language to be able to express ourselves within this medium.
Yep. So, I mean, we're excited to see customers that had a similar system get their hands dirty with this one, see if it matches their expectations and what they already had in-house.
Cool.
Yep.
Anything else?
No.
Dig it.
Yep.
We have a suggestion for new Wwise Up on Air topics.
Great.
So we will bring to the table and discuss about it.
Yep.
About LBE and working with ASIO.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
That's a hot topic right now here, actually. So definitely taking note of that.
Tip of the iceberg, and expect that for the future. If you have further ideas for the live stream, please drop an email to openears@audiokinetic.com. I'm keeping my ears peeled on that, and we're interested in growing the Wwise Up on Air series to try and bring this kind of information to you. Again, if you think this was valuable, subscribe. We're going to be doing more of these. We have a great schedule coming up later this year, and we'll just keep kind of trying to bring what's happening and what's exciting in the world of Wwise to you on a regular basis. So let us know. Is there something that's missing? Is there something we could be doing better? We want to hear from you. So drop a line.
Yep. You might also have seen those 1-minute Wwise videos we've started doing, which are great to shine a spotlight on a perhaps unknown or less known feature. So meds are
illustrious certifications, educational adventure game aficionado. Like, he's putting together these little 1-minute chunks that just they go down easy, and they expose a feature of Wwise that just
Last question. Okay, if you were to update on an older UE project to this new integration, will you run into issue?
So it's time to be honest and explain why we're shipping this feature in a patch release instead of the major release.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually migration from old workflows. So as I said earlier, what we want to do is make the workflow as seamless as possible for everyone. And one of the challenges we had was actually taking an old project and migrating it to that new workflow. So we did spend a lot of time migrating our Wwise Audio Lab project or migrating test projects.
Mm-hmm.
Our QA team has been extraordinary in that, finding
Heads
every
up, QA.
single, well, what we believe is every single thing that can break, but
Yeah.
that's as much as we know.
Yep.
So yeah, the goal is to have a migration workflow available for you. One thing to note is once you integrate that new version in Unreal, the first time you open your project, there will be a pop-up talking about event-based workflow,
Yep.
listing what the migration steps will be, and a yes or no question. We encourage you to click yes.
And as always, let us know how that goes. As Benoit mentioned, it is our feeling that the migration should be handled and smooth. Keep us posted.
Yep.
Let us know.
Another question that got lost in the suggestions is: do you see any reason to continue using the workflow?
The old workflow.
The old workflow. Sorry. Yes. The reasons we see are in our head. Corner cases, studios that really had something with the SoundBank management that existed already, that knew their system. If you're close to shipping, I wouldn't recommend updating to that, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, we essentially we're keeping both workflows at the same time for now. but our plans is to deprecate the old one and completely remove it in future releases.
Great.
We won't do that tomorrow,
Yeah.
but in a few years, the old workflow will just be gone.
Yeah. Speaking of future releases,
Yep.
what's next?
So yeah, we're hard at work with event-based in Unreal, trying to ship it for the end of the month. Once that's behind us, we're gonna focus our eyes on 2020.1, our next version, which will try to bring some elements of event-based in Unity.
So if you're out there working in Unity, you've been tuned into this live stream and you're thinking, when is this coming? The future.
Yep.
We're working next to bring some of these same paradigms into that Unity workflow for you. Again, automating the media management piece of game development and really just smoothing out the bi-directional communication as well.
Mm-hmm. Also, I don't know if there are any people listening now that have their own engine, that work for a company managing their own engine. If you need help or tips into recreating a similar workflow in your engine, we're always happy to chat.
Open ears.
Open ears.
Audiokinetic.com. Drop a mail. Cool.
Yep.
Well, and again, like anything we can do here to create these workflows that empower Wwise users to express themselves in the context of today's interactive mediums, this is at the core of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make things easy and really just bring this power to the people. So
exactly. Well, to the sound designers.
To the sound designers, composers, and voice artists in the world.
Yep.
Right? So with that, Bernard, thanks for your help today.
Thank you.
It's been great to have you along. Benoit, your expertise on the Wwise Up hands-on is unparalleled in the event-based packaging feature.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks so much for being here. Everyone in the chat room, cheers for the great questions and the rah-rahs. It's great to see so many of you back and so many familiar faces, text faces. And yeah, we hope you tune in next time. We'll see you then.
All right. Take care, everyone.